house, and if any Indian tries to stop me, I'll blast him.
You know, the only thing more pathetic than Indians on TV is Indians watching Indians on TV.
Hey everybody, it's Ian. It's time for another episode of Native Film Talk, and today I actually talked with somebody from Molly of Denali, who works on the show, Joe Yates. He's Haida. He has a Haida name that, you know, if I tried to pronounce it, it would be a disservice to his name. So I'll let you wait for him to say it. And I was really excited to talk to him. You know, I mentioned during my episode with him, I had a few goals in my vision board that I wrote down when I first started the show. One was to be in the top 50 film review podcasts on Apple Podcasts, and we got that one. You know, we didn't stay there, but we at least were there. We touched it for I'd say about 3 weeks. So at any given time for that 3-week period last year, or this year rather, in 2021, a random person could have just searched film and TV, film reviews, and they could have just been scrolling and they could have came across Native Film Talk. So it's kind of a traffic-based goal, you know. I mean, if you're kind of on fire, you got a steady listener base, then you're going to stay in that top 50. But that's where, you know, reviews and people sharing and people talking about it, it really helps. And also it's on me to produce good content that is also consistent. So we hit that goal. So that was one I was real excited about. The other one I have is, like, I have a list of, like, actors that I have, like Wes Studi, Gary Farmer, Martin Sensmeyer, Irene Bedard, kind of, you know, the heavy hitters. And I have them as, like, get one of them to interview or to talk to. And I kind of did that. On Clubhouse, I interviewed Gary Farmer, or I moderated a room with Gary Farmer, for Gary Farmer, co-moderated. And so I actually talked to Gary Farmer one-on-one indirectly, and so that was pretty cool. But I don't count that because he didn't actually come onto the podcast. But he did. You called me by my first name a few times, so that was pretty awesome. And I did ask him a few film questions, and maybe someday I'll talk about that. That was a pretty unique experience that I was invited to do. And the last one was to talk to somebody from Molly of Denali, because before this podcast ever even started, Molly of Denali was the shit. Molly of Denali was the gold standard for, like, this is like pre-Res Dogs, this is pre-Rutherford Falls. So in a time before those two shows were even breathed into existence, Molly of Denali was around. And so you had to look to PBS, of all places, for the most culturally native relevant content, like, ever. Frankly, for kids, you know, outside of, like, Sesame Street, that's, like, came the closest, and even then that was, like, it's not that great for natives anyway. And so Molly of Denali was the gold standard, and so I always wanted to talk to somebody who worked on that show, because I'm just like, what is that like? And this interview I had with Joe Yates, he's a writer. He has one head writing credit to his name. It was the Olympics episode, and so I don't want to go into too much detail about it. But if you have not watched Molly of Denali, you can watch these episodes on YouTube. You can watch them on Amazon Prime. Any way you can get it, obviously PBS. It's regularly scheduled. Please look at any episode you can find on Molly of Denali, and you will be impressed. I mean, Mazik Cho, there's no reason I should know that, but Molly of Denali teaches. Also, one of the coolest things is they have educational resources for people who are, like, non-native or not of that region, not of that tribe. And so they can look on their website and just be educated like crazy. And so this is like a perfect blend of education, native writing, culturally relevant material. It's just a great, awesome convergence of things that, frankly, I didn't know I needed. Like, if you told me a native kids show was coming out, I wouldn't be all that excited about it. But if you watch I promise you, I keep talking about Molly of Denali and I bring someone on and people are like, yeah, it's just a kid show. Just go watch Molly of Denali. Just one episode on YouTube and tell me that isn't one of the coolest things you've ever seen in your life. Like, a PBS kids show does not jump off the page as like, oh wow, I should check that out. It's not like Blood Quantum, you know, or like smoke signals. It's not like way up there of like, oh man, this is the pinnacle, this is amazing. It's not like Res Dogs. It doesn't jump off the page. It's like, I need to watch this. Even if you're an adult, you don't have any interest in watching a kid show, just consume a few minutes until you can't tolerate it anymore. But I promise you, you will be like, how is this? I wish this was available when I was young. That's the first thing I thought. But the thing that makes me excited, and what I talked to Joe with, is our kids are going to have this. Our kids do have this available to them. I mean, yeah, they'll have Res Dogs, but that's going to be an old show to them someday. What they have right now is they're going to have Molly of Denali. They're going to have Spirit Rangers, which is, Bobby Wilson, friend of the show, former guest of the podcast, he's going to be working on. So we have shows like Molly of Denali. We have shows like Spirit Rangers coming out. Like, there's a lot of great content that really, for the kids, that's the most important thing right now is, yes, for us that are coming of age or of age and have consumed bad representation for a long time and finally have this breath of fresh air. Yes, it's important for us to see that, but I think for our children, it's important for them to get the right message, which is the truth, off on the right foot. And I think it's amazing to have something like Molly of Denali appeal to non-native kids. And once again, if you told me Molly of Denali, the pitch, I would have been like, well, I don't know how many native kids would want to see that, but their audience spans across all ethnicities, and it's a global reach. So I was really excited to get Joe onto the show. Joe is a writer on the show. He also does many things. He has a website. Please go check out his website, alaskanfilms.com. He has a couple of short films on there that I talk about during my chat with him. One of them is Songs of Our Ancestors, and that documentary, it's a short film. It's available for free on his website. I mean, gosh, it's for, I get a little emotional during my chat with him, and I take pause and trying to gather my thoughts there because it's such a powerful short film, because it's exactly what I go through. It's what every native parent goes through who struggles with trying to find the way to, like, do I teach my kid my language? What's the cost of, like, filling their head with my language when Spanish, Mandarin probably makes more sense, like what is that conundrum? Or if you come from a family where you have two different native parents, like in my case, my son has two Navajo parents, but what if he had a Navajo and an Apache parent? What is that? What does the responsibility lie? And so Joe, he's Haida, his wife is Yupik, and so he talks about that a little bit in his short film, Voices of Our Ancestors, not Songs of Our Ancestors, I apologize. Voices of Our Ancestors. He has another short film on there. It's his first short film, Native Oratory. He's got so many short films available on his website. Please go check that out. He is a phenomenal writer, director, he runs a film production photography company. He does a lot of things, but most importantly, he's just a phenomenal human being who's just trying to be a father and create a world that is better for his child to grow up in, and trying to be a father that is going to impart enough language onto his children that they know more than he does. And it's just an admirable pursuit, and one that I hope to continue to pursue with my wife. And I'm just so excited for everyone to be hearing this conversation. This was a longer intro than I thought it was going to be. I apologize, but I just want to set this up. I just want to tee it up good for everyone so they understand. Like, please give this a good shot, because it's a phenomenal conversation, and I can't wait to bring him back onto the show for something else that he talked about. For those of you that are fans of the Life Below Zero series, there's a spin-off, and it's called The First Alaskans, and he talks about his work going to be on that. He's working on that show currently right now, and so he talks a little bit about what that's going to be like. So he's doing Molly of Denali. He's done his short films that are phenomenal, that are available on his website, and he's currently working on Life Below Zero, the First Alaskans, which, frankly, reality TV, that's a whole other branch of like Native American representation that we don't get. You know, we don't get our fair shake. We watch shows like Survivor and Alive. We're like, man, a Native would kick ass on that. And so we finally get to see what it's really like, and how we are much different, even though we seem alike, other than, you know, like other people. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoy it. Talk to you later. All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining the Native Film Talk podcast. I'm joined here today by Joe Yates, and I initially got hooked up with him because, well, he followed the show and had mentioned that he was on a writer of Molly of Denali, and I was just like, God, I love that show. Like, I saw Molly of Denali when I was really looking for. I wasn't even looking for content at that time for like the show. I stumbled across it. PBS, you know, we have a digital antenna and we live in Phoenix, and we just happened to get PBS, and I was flipping through PBS and I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is like a native. This looks like a native girl. This looks like, then I saw it looked like a totem pole. I'm like, what is happening? And she walked into the trading post and she was talking to her grandpa, and they were exchanging, you know, native languages, like in basically in English, like so casually. I'm like, what is this show? And it just blew my mind. And I hadn't had Native Film Talk as a website or an Instagram page, and I just like posted on my personal IG of like, does anybody else like know about this amongst like my 200 friends and family that follow me, and like nobody had really heard of it. And I was just like, God, I need to remember this someday, when I have a kid, and we do now. Unfortunately, he's only 2, so he's like not that interested in like all the dialogue. He doesn't get all of it. He'll watch it for a little bit. But so when Joe messaged and said that he was a writer on Molly of Denali, I'm just like, God, we got to shoehorn a way for me to talk to this guy. But just as more and more time has gone on, I just become more fascinated with, I mean, one, his career, the other things he's involved with. But mostly just this show is like monumental. Like this is like Res Dogs, like kind of in a way where it's like, we're going to look back on this someday as like, that was the foundation that was laid that allowed us to get to where we are now. And hopefully our kids can say that. And so Joe, thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you want to introduce yourself for a little bit?
My name is Watsastie. My English name, or sorry, yeah, my name is Watsastie. My English name is Joe Yates. I am happy to be here. It's been a long time coming, and I'm definitely happy to be here.
Yeah, this is awesome. Well, you're a writer on Molly of Denali. You are, your background, your education is all in film. But why don't you go ahead and get started? Just start from the beginning. What got you interested in film? I read your blog, so I know, but I want to hear it so the listeners can.
So you're the one.
Yeah, I'm the one.
So yeah, I was an anthropology major, going to the University of Alaska Southeast in Juneau, mm-hmm. And I was emphasis on Haida history and culture, my culture. And my senior year, I took an ethnographic filming class, and I just fell in love with the process. Mm. Like the very first day we're in class, like there's gonna be a native oratory competition coming up in a couple months. Can we do something like that? And I led our little group, and I spent 17, 18 hours a day. I skipped meals. I forgot to go to other classes. Like I just fell in love with the struggle, the watching other people's reactions, everything. Like it was great. I love it, every part of it. From there, went back home to Craig, Alaska, Southeast Alaska, and about 3-4 years went by. I started doing little high school basketball reels for a local basketball team.
Yep.
And my wife was like, "You really enjoy this, don't you?" Because I'm just doing all this for free.
Really?
And yeah, and
So what were you doing, I guess for, I don't know, for a career at that point or for a job or anything?
yeah, so I was a Boys and Girls Club manager for the 3 or 4 years there.
Okay. Okay.
And I had the kids. So the way I got paid for to go to the games, I had the kids record all the games. And I would just go in there and edit, make a little reel into it.
I
And
see.
people started to love it. I started like, hey, this is going somewhere. And my wife was like, let's quit our jobs. Let's move. Let's go back to school.
Oh.
So we got back to college broke again. And
And did you all have kids at this time?
we did not have kids at this time, no.
Okay.
I have 2 little ones now. The second year I was in school at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, where I was going to school for film, is when my daughter, Nayakuk, was born. And I started, or no, sorry. I was in a documentary film class, and I was, we had to get our own little assignments. And there was this girl from back home. She was in a master's program. She was in her last year of playing basketball. So I was like, hey, basketball season hasn't started yet. Maybe we can do this start to finish.
You had done reels already. Yeah.
So, I played basketball growing up. So basketball, films, like it's in my blood, typical Native.
Yep. Ball is life. I get it.
Ball is life. And so she's in the MBA, and like 3-4 weeks went into it. She kept on cutting off meetings. She kept on cutting off shoots. Another 3-4 weeks went later. I was like, I don't have time for this. Like I wish I did, because it seemed like it could be an amazing story. It could be really inspirational, especially for kids back home. Because there's not a lot of natives who are going to college. There's not a lot of natives who are playing basketball on a college level. And also there's not a lot of natives who are pursuing their MBA. So I thought this would be like a really inspirational story. So I went to my professor. I'm like, my subject is not working out. So he's like, so what can you do? I'm like, well, I know my family won't cancel on me. He's like, what's special about your family? My wife is Ubik. I'm Haida. There's less than a handful of Haidas who speak our language. I'm intermediate. I know some, not fluent. If I can learn more and teach my daughter. My daughter is about 6 months to 9 months old when we're shooting this. And so I had about a half a semester to do a full semester's worth of documentary. Yeah. So fast forward a little bit. Next thing you know, I got like an A- in my class, and I continued working on it, a little editing here and there. And I was like, I think this is good enough to submit a couple film festivals. And next thing you know, it's being shown like South Korea to China to Italy to Los Angeles, and my name was right by Clint Eastwood.
Oh my God.
It's just like, what? It's just like all these names who you look up to and seen on TV for many years. I was starting to get on all those film festivals.
And this is Voices of Our Ancestors.
Voices of Ancestors. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, he has a website called alaskafilms.com. Not film, singular, films. And he has his work available on that website. Voices of Our Ancestors is one of the films that's on there. And I only watched the trailer. Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch, but it's just a 12-minute video. But my goodness, even just the trailer, like if you have had any of the struggles that, he's mentioning, where it's just like you intermediate speaker, beginner level speaker, novice speaker, and you have children, and that kind of changes everything. And I think especially as our native speakers numbers are dwindling, everyone gets that fire lit under them for different reasons. But I think for me and him, we both resonated with I think the common thread is like our kids did that for us. Or we're just like you see opportunity to start fresh. It's like all the time that I could have put into it at the right time, I can do that now. In conjunction with trying to learn myself, I can imprint on the next generation in the best way possible. And it sounds like all of that is translated in this short film. And it why do you think why do you think it resonated with people who are really not native so much to the point where like Clint Eastwood is reading it on the podium?
Um, I think it's just like that personal struggle you have within yourself of um, your self-identity. And sorry, just to rewind a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's a lot of people don't realize that we're even around, and knowing that we're here, and seeing like, we're modern day, we're using microphones and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like we're not just in history books. And then they find out who we are and that we're here, but we're struggling to keep our identity alive, our language alive. And there's not many resources. And so I think they just kind of put themselves in that spot. Like, what if there's only like 5 English speakers left? What would you do?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to do whatever I can do to keep our language alive. And I believe the medium of film definitely help with that. At least that's the hope.
It's it's admirable, but I think it's more than admirable in the sense that it's necessary, because I look at my people and I feel like Navajo people in Indian country, people almost get like enamored by us because they're like, oh look, they can all introduce themselves in their language, and man, they really are. Um, their language is in a good place. I've heard non Navajos tell us that, and it's in our school system. If you go to school on the res K through 12, there's Navajo language smattered throughout, but it's almost the same exact level of speaking all the way through. It's just beginner level. Like it's not conversational unless you take it like in high school, where like you get gradually, unless you take it in high school, or it's also taught in the home. It's not reinforced. And so we can all introduce ourselves and say our clans. And so there's almost this false sense of security. And so when I watch like your documentary and I see even just other indigenous languages like put on the verge of like their language being erased because there's no native speakers, or their language their native speakers that they have are unfortunately maybe have dementia or going senile, or it's just like, well, they're alive but we kind of missed our shot, so we just got to take what we can get. And I just see that mad dash, and that's my fear, is that my people are closer to that than they realize, much closer than they realize, and that we don't have that fire lit under us collectively. Because right now it's just like, come on, you got to learn your language. Like there's no sense of urgency, like grabbing you by your shirt collar and be like, what is wrong with you? Like time is of the essence. Yesterday should have been a better day to start, but let's just do it today. And so when I hear your documentary, even just in the trailer, I hear your wife's voice talking about it as a mother, of just like, what kind of native am I? Almost like she doesn't say those exact words, but like, what kind of native am I? Like, I don't even know my language. I don't even know my culture, to the point where like I feel comfortable enough to say that I identify as like my native nation. Um, can you talk a little bit about that? Like why you chose to show that particular realism? Because I'm sure, I don't know if did you quarrel with that at all to show that kind of plight, pain, conflict?
Um, yeah, so from what outsiders read, is that Navajo is the most spoken language fluently in the United States anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And then Yupik is right behind.
Mm.
And I was doing some research while doing the documentary, and Yupik's, their rate is drastically going down, just as we were about 30 years ago.
Mm.
So the documentary doesn't just hit on my language, Hakil, the Haida language of the state where it's at, but the process of where Yipiks are going if they continue this rate, that they'll be right where we're at in about 30 years if we don't do anything.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just hopefully just a little wake-up call to hopefully to pull on some strings, and like that's how we feel. It's life or death type of thing for our culture.
In watching the Native Oratory, your first film, I don't recall the name of the individual at the beginning of the film. She was talking about kind of her boarding school experience. And like, I think that we don't really, or residential school, I believe up north is kind of referred to as that, but it's like, we don't, in my house, it was such a split decision for my grandparents on my mom's side to teach Navajo to her kids, because to them, I mean, now we know, you could learn as many languages in the home at concurrently, simultaneously, and it won't have any effect on your fluency level or competency level with all three or four, however many, two. But because our grandparents, uncles and aunts in some cases, went through those schools and they were ESL, essentially, they're all English as a second language, and they were all told that their language was a hindrance. You had generations of people across Indian country, and in First Nations telling their kids, like, you need to learn English. Your language will do nothing but hold you back, because that was like ingrained in our people from the start, on top of our culture being bad and not right and not pure. But even just that of like, look how terrible you do in school. Imagine your kids not knowing their language. It'd be that much easier for them to get ahead in the world. And just like us, you have that conviction as a parent of like, I just want my better life for my kid. So for them to think like, oh, I'm going to withhold our language to help them get to where they need to go, it's like, it's such a sick and twisted story to have us be in a completely different position generations down the road, where we're just like almost the opposite of just like, God, I wish I could have just gone back and said like, no, if you don't understand. But there was no, it's so hard as a parent, it's just like you do what's best for your kid at the time with the most available information that you have. And that was the best that they had available in it. So I feel like that story in itself isn't told enough. And I'm happy that you got to tell that story. And it sounds like you're going to continue to tell that story, hopefully, as your daughter becomes more fluent in both of those languages and as you progress in your language. Can you talk about any efforts you've seen outside of you, or just that whole landscape as a whole? Like, I feel like I've never seen people do it like this. I feel like it's a one-off. Like, people don't dedicate their career to it like you have.
Oh, you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to kind of talk what you're talking about was, like it's kind of like a chain. My grandmother, she was in a boarding school. So my mother, she was kind of grown up without a motherly figure. And my nan, she didn't want to teach my mom the Haida way of life. She wanted to teach her the Western culture, so she wouldn't get beaten like she was. So that kind of got passed down to me, and then I had to pick it up along the way. So there's a little back history of that. I'm sorry, I got a little ADHD.
You're okay. I this is probably the worst interview because I'm the same way. I was just talking about what made you focus on just kind of language revitalization efforts.
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, my first major was anthropology, so and emphasis on Haida history and culture. Every single book that I read was from 1972 and backwards. There's nothing new from 1972 on. And then also I see a lot of kids and then younger they only watch TV, they only do YouTube, they only do nowadays they're doing some podcasting because that's the cool thing.
Yeah, there you
But
go.
but so I'm trying to evolve with the times of all right, so if I write a book now, who's going to read it? Who's going to go to the
Right.
library? There might be the dozen or so, but if I make a film and there's going to be at least 40 people in the audience, you know, that's like 3-4 more times than I would have wrote a book. So that's how I was thinking as like a 19-year-old. Is uh, is I want to try to show as much culture as I can on the screen to try to keep it alive, type of thing. So that's how it began, and that's kind of been a mission ever since. Is I haven't been only working on my culture since, but I try to treat everybody else's culture as if it was mine, because I know the pain and the struggle it is to keep our language and culture alive.
That's really admirable, because I feel like sometimes we can get real selfish with our efforts, rightfully so, because we're so concerned about our own backyard, our own people, and almost to a detriment. We can be so focused on just us that we don't pull people up when we have the opportunity to. So I think that's fantastic and amazing that you just said what you said, is that you try to be receptive to helping other people. In regards to your comment about finding nothing but 70s books and earlier, me and my wife, so my wife, I'm going to plug my wife's business because this is right in line with what you do, what you're talking about. I'm sure you can relate when you're trying to find stuff to teach our kids the native language. It's all what you said. It's all outdated, and every book you pick up is written by some white linguist. It probably wasn't even like a native speaker. It just consulted native speakers. And so when you try to learn from that book, it's like there's a disconnect between how we actually speak and how they teach in the book. And so you're like, okay, so this is how the sentence should sound. And you go and say it to your grandma or your mom, and they're like, no, nobody says it like that. And then so like you spend most of your time like almost just bouncing it off of like, okay, here's what the textbook says it should, come out as. And you get corrected most of the time. Or it's like, no, it's like, okay, you can say it that way, but this is how we really say it. And you're just like, well, what kind of like relevant material is out there? And really there isn't. And so you have two options: either give up, or really three actually, or just keep forging in the path that you're on, or try to make your own resources for yourself. And that's kind of what my wife does. My wife has a website and an Instagram page called AlisonExchange.com. Allison Exchange on Instagram. And she makes Navajo really relevant, like culturally relevant resources for Navajo language learners and teachers, for really just like preschool kids and elementary school kids, and really anybody that is at the beginner novice level of trying to learn. Where it's like you can't go out and find Navajo flashcards unless you make them yourself. And so that's what she did. She was like, I'm just going to make flashcards for my son, and 1 through 10, here's the colors, here's some animals. And she just started selling them, at first making them free, digital downloads. You can print them off yourself, number charts, here's a clan kinship chart you can fill out yourself, and here's the names for all the stuff. And it's amazing how like frustrated, how little there is in this world, with people like trying, like my wife just trying to be like, can I just get something for my kids? It's like you can either be a professional linguist trying to work on high level, like big strategic level language efforts. Like there's nothing for the ground of like, I just want to help myself like today. I don't want to wait for some institute to launch or be available in my program. I don't want to wait for Rosetta Stone to pick up my language, because I feel like for the masses, that's all they have available to them. And so what you and your wife are doing, can you talk a little bit about how you're navigating those waters of trying to use, try to create content for your daughter to use, your kids actually?
Yeah. So what your wife does, it's kind of like what we did in the Voices of Our Ancestors. We made our homemade flashcards. We made our own ABCs. And yeah, basically the undertone is, don't wait for those Rosetta zones. You can do it all within the house. So those like the whole documentary is shot in the house, just so we can show you don't need to go out and rely on anybody else. But yeah, we do that. Now that my daughter is 4, that's hard to say. Ooh, she's going old. Now she's able to speak back to me now.
Oh, wow.
So about 6 months ago or so, just randomly at dinner, Hansti Gudagang. And I was like, she said it like the pronunciation was great. She never said it before. And I was like, all right, you want water? Okay, I'll get you water. And so I got her water. So we're able to talk back and forth just a little bit, but it's a lot more than who I was speaking beforehand. But she's able to count and do faces and do all the what you should be learning as English as a 4-year-old, but she's doing in Haida. And every single time she does something new, it just warms my heart.
No, I know. I did. So your face that you made, I completely get it. Like we daydream, me and my wife, about. I'm like, it hurts me. So we're growing out his hair because in our culture, hair is very important for men, and I'm not, obviously, but there's cultural reasons why you shouldn't cut it. You should grow your hair to a certain length, to a certain point in their life. So we're trying to do certain things like that to get him to love his hair, to love himself, because, and this all goes back to representation around the whole idea of this podcast. It's like, I don't want him to hate himself growing up, because I feel like especially millennials, maybe even Gen Zers, we can all get to a point or all come to agreement on, like, there was our Gen Xers rather. There was a point when in our journey of becoming an adult, it's like we all go through this self-hate, self-loathing phase. And so that's why, like, what you and your wife are doing, what me and my wife are doing, what you do with your work on Molly of Denali, hopefully that can help the next generation. One, go through that phase and like have it be lessened, or have that phase completely eliminated where they just love themselves growing up and love their language and love where they're from. Because I always saw it as a hindrance, because that's kind of how my grandparents almost, pushed it on me. It's like, you need to learn your language so you can get the hell away from this place and go take, go make a living, because there's nothing for you here. But that was kind of ingrained in them. And it hurts me to think about that. But what makes me, going back to your statement about how it made you feel as a father, hearing your daughter speak to you in that native language, I daydream about it. I'm like, if my son can like have a conversation when he's like 4 or 5, even if it's just a few words with my grandparents who are still alive, thankfully, who are his great grandparents, I'm like, that would be the first time that like a baby, like a child, an infant would have spoken Navajo to their grandparents in like generations. And like, excuse me, that just that thought, just like makes me think like, God, I need to just get off my ass and just do something and just put in the work, because that like makes me feel whole. Even seeing my son grow his hair out, I'm like, knowing like he's going to grow his hair out, knowing that it's not going to be cut off by anybody other than his family. And that's the first time my family can say that in like 4 generations, and I'm just like, that's the kind of stuff that we should be living for. That's the kind of stuff that we should be advocating for, and really like just talking more about. And so I appreciate your story, and I appreciate like your work, because it's important. Like everything that you're doing is important in your household and at work. And you're doing like what I would love to do with my kid, is like, you're making the content you want your child to consume. Can you talk about that? Just like,
Yeah, so I make these little home videos with my daughter. My one and only puppet voice sounds like Elmo, or
oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
And my daughter loves it, and we just make these little content videos. So that's how I teach her, and we watch it over and over again. but yeah, we just kind of have like a little conversation, and then there's one video she gave the puppet a hug, and it was just like she was really engaged with it, and it was great. I mean, like we do it off camera too, but I mean, like
right.
the content wise, we make a lot of little home videos and rewatch it, and so that way she can hear herself speak, and as well as listen to us speak more, just fluent or just in the language.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So where is your I guess like goal for your kids and for your language and your wife's language? Like obviously fluency, but I mean like that's a long range goal. I guess what does that mean to you? Like where do you want to be with your family in terms of your language?
I would love my kids to know more than me.
No, same.
And then be able to pass it down to their kids and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate goal. I mean, like if you can just continue with the ball rolling, and hopefully even just inspire one other person to do the same along the way, then you change that whole chain of reaction as well.
And that's, and I should have had my wife on the podcast because this is what she does more than me. So my wife speaks and understands more than I do. And me, I'm learning much more than she has. So thankfully, she's able to teach me. And her older brothers are both fluent. And so anytime they're around, we try to like make sure it's like, hey, just even if like those throwaway commands, like don't transition to English. Like, if you're telling him to get you some water, say it in Navajo, first, let him understand that, we all understand. Don't think you have to translate. So like some of those things, like I would love for these throwaway phrases to just be that they use, to just be a part of my son's vernacular. And same thing, what you said, I want him to learn and know much more than me. And I think that's the hope for any father, but specifically with my language. I want him to know it and learn it and love it to the point where he's like, I want my kids to know this and love it just as much, if not more than I do. Because it's so much of who we are, and it's so much of like a piece of like my self-discovery as a Navajo person. Then I'm just like, gosh, like what was I? Where was I? I feel like I'm finally finding myself, and I have this like crisis, which is part of the reason why I started this podcast. Is I've talked about it before. I've never had a job where being Native mattered, like because I'm just in like business. I work for a publicly traded company. I work in a utility company. Like it's never been important for me to be Native in my job. And I was a Native American Studies major in college. That was like the closest I got to being connected. Took a Native American film and Native Americans in film and television class, and that like changed my world and how I viewed and consumed content. But it's like, it's never been important for me to be Native until I did this podcast. And then that self-discovery of just like, who am I? That existential crisis you have as like a Native person, walking in these multiple worlds of just like, which do I identify with and where do I want to be? And I think I want to be, closer to my ancestors. And so I think what you're doing is admirable. When I watch Molly of Denali, I always call it Molly from Denali, Molly of Denali. I mean, the first thing I think is Mazik Cho. She always opens up with the show with with that phrase. But how did you guys get this show? I don't know how much you know because you came on as a writer, but like, I have so many questions about this show because I feel like to our detriment sometimes, like we are too guarded with our information and our culture. Do you know how the community felt about sharing the culture, specifically like the elders? Was there any issues with that, like sharing culture that's going to be nationally viewed and globally, I'm sure at some point?
I don't know that side of the story. I do know how it got started though.
Okay.
So all kind of started with President Obama, him renaming Mount McKinley to Mount Denali. And I'm terrible with names. I really hope she doesn't listen to this.
It's okay.
But she, one of the WGBH, or now GBH, the people who actually make Molly Denali, who sends it off to PBS, she had an idea of, or she just thought of the name Molly of Denali. And then she's like, let's make a show out of it. So kind of just the name kind of rhymed. So then she connected with Princess, the creative producer at the time, and then next thing that just kind of snowballed into getting Molly Denali. I think it took like 2 years to get off the ground. I was there about a year before it first aired, so yeah, I missed that first year.
No, it's okay. So let's talk a little bit about, I mean, people who haven't seen the show, go watch it. Like even just look on YouTube, find any way you can watch it, and you'll just, as soon as you watch it, the first any minute, any length of time that you watch, you're just like, I've never seen anything like this. Um, and I think so much of that is important for children to see themselves. And because we never got to see that. The most representation we would get is like Sesame Street, and like that's like the most diversity you would see on camera. Other than that, it was like a bunch of Billigana kids. It was like non-native kids. It was a bunch of um it was always like non people of color. And some of us are not necessarily very dark, but it's like our culture isn't represented in any way, and when it is, it's always in a mocking fashion, or it's seasonal. It's just Thanksgiving. And so I think it's so important for Molly of Denali to show just how unique our cultures are. And we are native every day of our lives. Like we do regular things, but we also do things that are so different, like the Native Youth Olympics, the episode that you wrote. So I didn't know anything about the Olympics up in Alaska at all until I went to college, where I met people that were Yupik, that were Inuit, that were from, or Inupiaq, were from Alaska, and participated in these games. And we became Facebook friends, and I would look at their pages and I'm like, what is that ball that you're kicking? And they're like, what are you guys doing? And so I just, learning from them, I'm just like, what is this? And I thought that was like one of the coolest like things ever, because we have like the indigenous games like down here, like in the States and stuff, but it's like we're playing regular sports. You guys are doing sports that are in your communities. Can you talk about that, just that whole experience and sharing that?
Yeah, the Native Youth Olympics part.
Yeah, because you were the head writer on that episode, right?
Yep. So I had the same kind of revelation there. When I was going to trade school before going to college, there was a Native Youth Olympics practice, and I saw these kids like jump and kick the net, and I'm like, what the heck is? Yeah, I had like the same reaction. I'm like, what is this? And then people hopping down the knuckles, and
oh man.
And then it was too late for me to join at the time, because I think it was like the middle of the season. So the next season I jumped on, and yeah, it's a sport. Native Youth Olympics, it's a sport that the interior natives and ones around the coast, they turn kind of like practice for hunting into a sport. So like each sport represents something. Like the scissor brow jump is jumping on the ice, so it helps you practice jumping on the ice. The 1 foot high kick is, I'm going to get this wrong, I apologize. It's like somebody is on top of a hill and you do your 1 foot, it represents to the town like, hey, we caught a caribou or something.
Okay.
And then a 2 foot is another different animal. But so that way the community knows that they got something and they can help out. And the seal hop, so you can get a little closer to the seal. And then there's a wrist carry, which helps you be able to carry the seal. So like each game represents like some kind of hunting activity. And I got to participate 1 year. That was truly amazing, to the point wherein the writers or the head writers, the head writers, they're, so what kind of episode do you want to write? I'm like, how about Native Youth Olympics? And they were like, what is that? So I kind of broke it down for them, and they were like, this would be a great episode. Yeah, so I had to make sure I get all uh, my history down before writing it. Luckily, my wife's Yupik. She helped me out a lot, and her whole family.
I was just gonna say, man, that's a lot of pressure. If somebody, you hate to feel like the representative of anything, but especially Indian country, like we're pretty harsh. Even when we get it right, we can be
Yeah,
really, really critical. So what was that like? What was the reception like?
that was pretty well. The my latest episode, season 2, Ukekok.
Mhm.
I had to have a lot of help on that one. That is basically when a young boy or a young hunter gets their first hunt and they have a throw party when the mom of the party gives out all these gifts. And that's totally not my culture. That's Yupik, coastal Yupik to be more accurate. So I had to, call my wife's mom and dad, and I had to get get a historian on board. And just because, like, yeah, no matter if there's like one word mispronounced or one little misaccuracy, if there's one male at this ukekok, they're like, Twitter will blow up.
Yep, yep.
So, and this is like not just my wife's culture, but my kids' culture as well.
Mhm.
So I want to try to make sure their culture is being representative as correctly as possible. So it's definitely, even though it's just my name on the main title, my wife's family and her just like tremendously helped on every
Mm.
single line. But yeah, so that one, um, I got a lot of like, well done, like I cried. I haven't, because C, and within the episode, Tui writes his grandmother a speech in Yupik. So to hear a speech in Yupik on national TV, like that's not done very much.
Yeah.
Even like episode 1, there'll be a couple of one-liners, but nothing at that level. So that was something they haven't seen before on national TV. So
Well, I'm sure it feels great because all you hear is Navajo and Lakota anyway, you're probably sick of all that. So you're just like, oh, you pick finally, you can celebrate that. What is, I want to, delve into your mind when you're making some of this stuff and really when you hear the reception, because I'm sure you don't like I'm trying to frame my question. Like, so you're making this. I don't know exactly your motives when you're making this, when you're actually doing the work. Like, what are you thinking of when you're making this episode? Like, who is the audience? Who are you making this for? And then the reception that you get. Because I mean, mine is like small scale, nothing compared to your show, the show you write on. But when I do this podcast, I'll get heartfelt emails and messages and DMs from people that one, I'm just like, I didn't even have you in mind when I was making this. I was just like putting my heart out there or just doing this out of passion. And you almost get surprised by the reception of just like, you almost feel like I didn't know the stuff I was doing was that important. That's like, I guess to me, that's my standpoint. But somebody who is doing something where it's like, what you're putting out there, this has never been done before. What is that like, that experience?
oh, um, to go back to the first part of the question, I write this basically for my kids.
Hmm.
I want, with the information I want is kind of relative what I want them to know. I know it's selfish, but
No, not selfish at all. Yeah.
but I'm hoping that others will feel the same way. Like I want my children to see this for this same reason. So
That's the much more admirable than most people's. A lot of filmmakers I hear, it's like, well, I want to make the movie that I want to see. I'm just like, well, at least for you, it's your kids.
yeah, um, and within the Ukekok, when he was writing to his, when he was writing his speech to his grandmother, I had my nan in mind.
Mhm.
My nan passed away when she was 12, or when I was 12, and so I was like, all right, what would I want to say? But I had to put it in Yupik language. Um,
So is that
so
your paternal, like which side of your family is that?
both my side, my mother and father are both Haida.
Okay.
But
I
my wife's family is Yupik.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
guess what so I should have been very specific. In Navajo, we have two different ones for our grandma, like depending if it's our mom's mom or our dad's mom. But it doesn't matter now. It's okay. Go ahead. I was just curious if there was a name differential, but it's okay.
Oh no, we have what we call moieties. So maternal is what you are, and I'm Haida, double fin killer whale, as you can see behind me. It's our crest. And my wife is Yupik, so she hasn't been adopted yet. You have to get adopted to the culture on the opposite clan, opposite moiety. So that's our mother and father type of thing. So
Oh, okay.
right now my kids don't have a clan, and so it's hard for me to tell them their history and their culture, specifically when they don't have a specific
Man.
tribe. So yeah, I'm just kind of waiting for the day. But yeah.
Yeah, and then the second part of the question I derailed you from, so sorry, was kind of what's the reception been like compared to like what you were expecting, and like
It's well, as a father too, it like I don't think of it too much. But when I go to like a doing, like a lot of people, hey, congratulations, your episode's great. I love Molly Denali. My kids love it. And just random people like at the clinic or something, just like get stopped. Um, and it's always great. And then right when I get back home, like I feel good, and my wife's like, take out the trash. So she's
can't be a rock star all the time, huh?
no, unfortunately. But no, my wife definitely keeps me humbled, and
Oh yeah, mine too. Oh yeah, mine too, for sure. She'll
yeah.
gut check me as soon as my ego gets a little too big. Um, gosh, I'm so happy to talk to you about this show because I wish that my people would do something like that, like make an animated show in Navajo. We have at some point, I think in the 70s or 80s, somebody had a great idea to retell our coyote stories in Navajo. I mean, that we already tell, like you tell these stories in the winter, when it's like hibernation and like when the first snow falls, it's like, oh, good, we can tell coyote stories now. And they're all, they're creation stories, basically, how the horny toad got his, scales on his back and why the coyote looks the way he does, kind of stuff. But it's all told in Navajo. And they did these very terrible animations, very old animations. It's all Navajo, all these stories, and the only thing that's in English is the title card to let you know which one's coming. But that's it. And then we had our Finding Nemo dubbed in Navajo and Star Wars: New Hope dubbed in Navajo. But it's like no one's creating content like this, and it's awesome that my son's going to have this show, but it's like a bummer because we don't have a show like this. I'd like other native nations don't have this show. Do you guys ever get like approached by other native nations of like, how do we do this for our people?
I haven't personally. Um, I'm like Alaska is a huge state.
You guys are
I
massive.
um I correlate with other Alaska natives, and they're like,
Okay.
hey, can you do a Lutic episode? I'm like, well, I shouldn't say anything, but later on in the season there will be one for you guys. So
Nice.
unfortunately, since like I believe Molly Denali premiered in 2019, so I haven't got to travel too much in the lower 48
Yeah, you
since
came
the
right
show
during
came out.
COVID. Came right during
Yeah.
COVID. Well, I think you make a good point, and I think that the lower 48 thinks of is we think of Alaska as this faraway place, which it is, but you guys are massive. You guys should be your own country, like how big you guys are. So that makes so much more sense that there are probably other native nations in Alaska that are probably like, I want to do this too. And it sounds like you have the same problem that I do, is like people have nothing but ideas for your show. And it's just like, I don't have enough time, man. Like if there was 10 of me, there still wouldn't be enough time. And I'll get around to it when I can. But yeah, that's amazing. I think I really hope that this inspires people to just take it by the reins. Almost bringing our conversation full circle is like, don't wait until you realize that youth suicide is a massive problem and that producing culture relevant content could potentially thwart some of those numbers. Like, don't wait until you have to be in a massive room making big budget decisions. Like, take this upon on yourself and start, like what Joe did. I mean, it's goodness, it's like, this is amazing, like what you're doing. I just hope you know that like you probably my most coveted guest, somebody from Molly of Denali. Like, when I first started this show, I had my like vision board of the stuff I wanted to do. I wanted to be on the top 50 podcasts of the United States for film reviews. I wanted, I still haven't got like a Wes Studi or Gary Farmer. Those are like my other one. But then I wanted someone from Molly of Denali. And so I got 2 out of the 3. So we're getting there. I can't thank you enough for coming on. But I want to talk real quick about, there's another person. There's only one other Haida person I know of, and that's I don't know his Haida name because I can't say it. But Damon Bellholter, he's a famous basketball player. It makes sense now. You guys are so passionate, and I respect that passion. And it's like, I wish I had that. I wish more people had that. Just, I feel like you're at a point of desperation, which is why you are where you are with your language revitalization. But both of you speak with such conviction with your language. And for him, I know his mother is, I can't remember, she's some kind of like language leader in their community. But I'm just like, man, both of you speak with such conviction and such passion for your language and for your future. And it just makes me, it really lights a fire under you. Just like, okay, what am I not doing and what should I be doing? So what message do you have for people that are trying to reconnect or trying to learn their language or just trying to get better at the language they currently speak?
Oh, well, Damon and I are cousins, so that might.
No way. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh.
mother's side. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, have the one thing I would say, just have small goals, and then your dreams will be big. Just keep chipping away at it, and next thing you know it, your dreams will come true. So, and yeah, don't wait for anybody else, because everybody else is trying to climb their own ladder. And for me, I always try to think down the road of like, I don't want to say I wish I could have. I want to say I'm glad I did. So like, I'm really glad I captured those moments on screen. I've been doing it every day, but not on camera with my daughter and my son. So I'm just really happy that I took the time to at least get the beginner level to where I can talk to a 4-year-old.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, that if I can get to the point where my son can do that with me, and if we're fortunate enough that my grandparents are still around in 3-4 years, that would be amazing to have him talk to his Masana or his Nelly. Like, that would just be insane. Like, to just think of that connection that's finally being mended after all these years of just crap that our people have been put through, and such trauma that was intentional. All of that intentional effort to get to where we are. Me and my wife, sometimes we sit around and we think like, God, it's gross that they thought of this. Like, this is exactly what they wanted, and it worked. And it's so freaking hard to undo it. And it just makes you sick to think like all of this was on purpose, but it makes you feel like, just like, God, let's do something about it. And that's why, like, when I see your content, I'm just like, why aren't more people doing this? Because more people should feel like this every day. More Native people should feel like this every day about their language. And normally I try to like broad brush it and be like other people, but this is very specific to like Native listeners, of just like, there's no time better than now. And frankly, the best time was yesterday, but really it's like, we got to make do with what time we have and respect that your language is still alive if it is, and just go after it. Because nobody, like Joe was saying, nobody else is going to do it for you, unfortunately. And if you wait, something catastrophic might happen. Another COVID-19 might happen, and a virus that predominantly takes elderly and in remote locations where there's food deserts and poor access to healthcare, like the majority of our native nations, you're going to lose a disproportionately number of native speakers, and your language could be closer to the brink of extinction than it was before. And you just can't wait for something like that. And Joe, thank you so much for coming on. This was this was an amazing chat. So you have other things in the pipeline. I don't know how much of that you can talk about, like the other work that you have.
Yeah, so I'm also a field producer for Life Below Zero,
Yep.
First Alaskans.
Yep.
So there's a spin-off where the whole cast is nothing but Alaskan natives. I'm
Finally
not
going to
sure.
show them what's what. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't talk too much yet because it's still in the making. The season one's still in the making, but somehow my name got through the weaves there, and they want Alaska Native to be able to be on the team. And somehow they got my name up. But they called me like, "Hey, I'm looking for a job, or we're looking for somebody to fill this job. Can you are you interested?" And I'm like, "I'll think about it." And then next thing you know, the executive producer got a Zoom call with me, and he's like, well, at the time, like I didn't know it was going to be nothing but Alaskan Natives. But when he told me, like, yeah, so the whole crew or all the whole cast will be Alaskan Natives, and I was just like, like what? And it was great. I mean, shows like Reservation Dogs, which you've been talking about the last 7 episodes or so, like that kind of show that we have an audience. We are worth the investment. And I guess they've been trying to get the show off the ground for like 8 years or something like that. But yeah.
I can tell you, man, all of Indian country will show up to that because we've painfully watched shows like Survivor, you know, and gosh, what is the Alive? And we're just like, man, if that was a native, man, if that was a native, you know, we always have that, you know, as a family, you sit around and be, you know, we just, you know, cuss to each other in our native language and be like, what an idiot, you know, when they do silly things and, you know, when they choose to bring rope instead of a knife, you know, or a fire starter, it's just like, what are you doing, you know? And so I really like that we're finally getting our due, you know. But what I think what's interesting is a lot of these people that are in these shows, like they make the choice to live this way, whereas like natives, like this is how we've always lived, and frankly we fight to still live that way because of our battles with subsistence farming and, you know, the grazing rights in some areas, you know, like down here our issues like with grazing rights and water rights, like because of those are slowly being stripped away and peeled back, it becomes harder and harder to hold on to that way of life. So if nothing else, I'm just glad that you're capturing that aspect of our culture, because even though it's going to be focused on, you know, Alaska natives, there's a lot of it that I'm sure can be we can see ourselves as adults in that, and I feel like that isn't represented enough, like the realism. And so I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, it's been a couple months since we've been shooting it now. And the reactions from the other crew members has been like, I've been working on this show for 9 years. I never cried.
Dang.
And the first couple that we shot, they're just like tearing almost every single day. And it's because, well, one, we're shooting it differently. If you watch Life Below Zero, it's nothing but gore and survival. But this one is shot with warmth because this is our home. This is who we are. We're not doing this just to survive, but we're doing this just because this is who we are. And when I talk to the crew off cameras, when the cameras aren't rolling, I try to remind them of this, like, settle down. Let's not show all the slow motion blood.
Yeah.
Let's get the heart into the story. So so that's basically my job, is trying to get the story moving, but in our way. Like, make sure we're represented correctly.
Man, that's badass.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, well, that's needed because when left to their own devices, we've seen what representation in media looks like, up until this point. So, I'm sure you would like it to be an all native film crew and like directed and produced by natives. But baby steps. You'll get the
Recruiting.
rest. Yeah, yeah, we'll get baby steps, but we got to start somewhere, and this is it. We've had these milestones in almost every single genre of film and television except for documentary, like a reality TV. We haven't had this. We've got it in documentary for a long time. We're recently getting now with TV with like Rutherford Falls and Res Dogs, but now like reality TV, like you're kind of a trailblazer in that way, where you're on set of a show like this, where it's like, I love that distinction where it's like, Billiganas, they're trying to live this way, where it's like we've lived this way forever. And I really want to see how it's like what you just said. It's like, this isn't for show. Like, this is how we live. This is who we are. And let's show that. And I'm really excited for that, man. So congratulations. Kudos to everything that you do. I can't wait to keep following your career. You're just the hit maker. Molly of Denali, you got this, you got your short film, Songs of Our Ancestors, even your first film you had, Native Oratory 2011. My goodness. So everybody check out his website, alaskanfilms.com, and he has got a lot of his work just on there. And this is a guy to follow for sure for a long time. He's going to keep impressing us. So thank you so much again for coming on the show.
If I can say one thing before closing out.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Sorry. I just want to say how thank you for all the work that you do. Gives us a voice to let out. But you also inspired me to write a basketball modern movie.
All right. I love it.
One of your old podcasts, you're talking about how come there's not a modern day basketball movie? We all love basketball. And I was like, you're right. So I've been writing for like 3 months now.
Oh my God.
So I'm hoping now that I put on the podcast here, put a little pressure on me to get it done. But
yeah, keep yourself honest. Yeah, everyone reach out and ask them, like, hey, where's that basketball script at?
Yeah, exactly.
God.
So I've been writing for the last few months, and a huge part because you sparked me to make one. So
damn, I'm more than honored to hear that. Thank you so much. God, that's great. I'm real excited now to see this come to fruition, whatever it looks like. God, with like ball is life across across all reses. And it's crazy to me that like, oh, can you think of like one of the most famous basketball players ever? It's like Damon Bellholter. Like, where's he from? Up north. You would have never thought, you'd think it's from the States. And I think that there's a great story to tell from your perspective, from you guys' perspective. So this is a real quick, I'm kind of taking us on a tangent before we go. I think even people would be thrilled to hear how difficult it is for like, you guys are like college athletes. You like travel on planes to go play other high schools, whether it's wrestling, basketball, like the distance you guys have to cover to like go play other schools in all of your sports. I think that's not talked about enough. And I never learned about it until I had friends from Alaska that I met at Dartmouth. And it's just like, God, Alaska is like, there's so much about Alaska that we can learn about, we can learn from. And that's one of those. So I'm so thrilled to hear that you're writing a basketball script, because if anybody should be telling that story, frankly, it should be you guys. I think it's going to be awesome. All right, everybody. Talk to you later.